The bells from Holy Name Cathedral from across the street give a soft series of dongs as they ring. Chrysanthemums line the counter in perfect rows, their delicate petals whispering against the still air of a quiet Chicago morning. The door opens and 3 men enter. Behind the counter stands a man in a press suit, his sleeves rolled slightly, hands gentle as he trims the stem. Dion O'Banion, florist, one-time choir boy, now king of the North Side. His eye betrayed no fear, only calculation. Power has made him comfortable, perhaps too comfortable. Footsteps approach, a smile, a handshake, and in that single moment of courtesy, history tightens its grip, because this flower shop is no longer a place of beauty or serenity. It is the epicenter of a war that will redraw the criminal map of Chicago forever. Welcome back to James on the Mob. I hope everyone has had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday experience. I know I did. Today, we cover another November event, the life and death of Dion O'Banion. O'Banion, often dubbed Dion by newspapers, lived a life defined by profound contradictions. He was simultaneously a former choir boy at Holy Name Cathedral, a devoted son who every year made a 150-mile drive to place flowers on his mother's distant grave, and a ruthless racketeer known for his explosive temper and deadly efficiency. His peculiar operational style, a blend of genuine charm and terrifying violence, earned him the chilling description of embodying sunny brutality. This is the story of how an Irish Catholic boy from a farming town was transformed into the supreme power of Chicago's North Side, and how his impulsive arrogance and 3 major acts of betrayal ultimately led to his assassination, plunging the city into the notorious gang wars of the Prohibition-era that would forever define Chicago's 1920s. Charles Dean O'Banion was born July 8, 1892, not in the violent industrial city of Chicago, but in the small agricultural town of Maroa, Illinois, located approximately 150 miles away in the quiet central portion of the state. His early life was relatively stable, defined by a modest, respectable working-class existence. His father, Charles Preston O'Banion, was a tradesman working variously as a barber, house painter, and plasterer. The stability of the O'Banion household was shattered by the illness and subsequent death of his mother, Emma Sylvia Brophy, around 1901, when Dean was still a young boy. Contemporary accounts emphasize that Dean was deeply attached to his mother, and during her illness, when physical contact was restricted due to her tuberculosis, young Dean coped by writing her letters every day and bringing flowers to be delivered to her. This small, persistent ritual of gift-giving and devotion to floral beauty hinted at an emotional dependence and an early recurring theme that would resurface in his professional life decades later. The death of Emma O'Banion served as the primary destabilizing event of his childhood, tearing the emotional anchor from his life. In the aftermath, his father sold the home, and seeking work in proximity to extended family, moved Dean and his older brother Floyd to Chicago, transposing the boy from a rural environment to one of the most volatile urban landscapes in North America. The family settled in a notoriously impoverished and heavily Irish working-class district on the near North Side, historically known as Kilgubbin, but universally nicknamed Little Hell due to its rough reputation and location near industrial furnaces. This neighborhood sat close to what is now Goose Island, bounded generally north and south by Division Street and Chicago Avenue, and east and west by LaSalle Street and the Chicago River. Early census records placed Dean and his father in the vicinity of North Orleans Street. This environment became the ultimate crucible for the young Dean. The dichotomy of his youth was startling. He attended Holy Name School, connected with Holy Name Cathedral on State Street, and for a period sang in the church choir, embodying the image of a devout Irish Catholic boy. However, the streets held greater sway than the choir loft. His immediate world was dominated by criminal friction, particularly at the intersection of West Oak Street and Milton Avenue, a notorious spot dubbed Death Corner by Chicagoans due to the sheer volume of unsolved murders that occurred there. He quickly graduated from petty juvenile delinquency, joining the juvenile Little Hellions, before moving into the more established Market Street Gang. This group specialized in safecracking, pickpocketing, and slugging work. A crucial physically defining event occurred around his mid-teens when O'Banion suffered a severe leg injury. He attempted to hop onto a moving streetcar, slipped, and was struck, with the vehicle running over his leg. The uneven healing left him with a permanent limp, necessitating the wearing of a specially built-up shoe. This disability earned him the cruel nickname Gimpy, a moniker few dared to use in his presence once he grew older. In the hyper-masculine physical world of the Market Street Gang, a disability was a liability that required immediate, ruthless compensation. The physical challenge forced O'Banion to adopt a philosophy of overwhelming, ruthless violence, cultivating a reputation for feline quickness and aggressive temperament to ensure he was the most feared, regardless of his handicap. He developed a rolling, lurching gait that became his trademark swagger, masking the constant pain and deep-seated need to prove his physical capability. His first serious brush with the law came at age 17 in 1909 when he was arrested and convicted for safecracking and assault, leading to a 3 to 6 month sentence in the Bridewell, Chicago's House of Correction. 2 years later, in 1911, he was arrested and convicted again for possession of deadly weapons and assault with a blackjack, and served another short term. These stints in the Bridewell were his only time in a correctional institution. They served as his graduate school. It was likely through these incarcerations and the networks of the Market Street Gang that he was mentored by the veteran criminals like the safecracker, Charles the Ox Riser. The Bridewell cured O'Banion of any fear of the law, but also taught him the value of political protection, a lesson he would apply with genius, precision in the coming decade. The Chicago newspaper circulation wars of the early 20th century provided O'Banion with the perfect violent apprenticeship, transforming him from a street delinquent into a seasoned professional enforcer. This was not a metaphorical battle for readership, but a kinetic war fought with guns, clubs, and fists on the streets of Chicago, funded by powerful publishers like William Randolph Hearst and Robert R. McCormick. O'Banion and his crew, still operating out of the Market Street Gang, were hired as sluggers. Their mandate was simple: intimidate newsstand owners into promoting only the paper that employed them, seize or destroy rival papers, and physically assault anyone selling the wrong publication. O'Banion and his associates initially worked for the Chicago Tribune, McCormick owned, but quickly demonstrated their mercenary nature by switching allegiance to the rival Chicago Examiner, a Hearst paper, lured by a more lucrative deal brokered by circulation boss Moses Annenberg. This period was foundational for O'Banion's future reign. The violence was indiscriminate and constant, but the greater lesson was strategic. O'Banion learned that violence, when committed on behalf of powerful legitimate entities like the press barons, was not met with justice, but with immunity. The newspapers secured special police commissions for their thugs, allowing them to carry concealed weapons legally and granting them a shield of corporate and political protection. This knowledge that he could shoot a man in broad daylight and evade justice if he worked for the right people empowered his later aggressive behavior and taught him that the law was a tool of the powerful, not an obstacle to be feared. More importantly, the circulation war cemented the core of the future Northside Gang. It was here that O'Banion strengthened unbreakable bonds with his lifelong associates, Earl Jaime Weiss, George Bugs Moran, and Vincent The Schemer Drucci. These men, childhood friends who survived the crucible of little hell together, formed a bond of loyalty that transcended mere business logic, a trait that would distinguish them from the corporate structure of the rival Chicago outfit. The era of the circulation slugger also introduced the public to O'Banion's developing duality. While cracking heads on the street, O'Banion simultaneously cultivated a respectable, almost artistic persona as a singing waiter at McGovern's Liberty Inn at 661 North Clark Street. O'Banion was said to possess a beautiful Irish tenor voice. This angelic performance was an elaborate cover for predation. O'Banion's job was to serenade patrons with his sentimental ballads, and while he charmed the room with his voice, his confederates were busy picking pockets or preparing the notorious Mickey Finn drinks. O'Banion utilized this venue to drug patrons' drinks. Once incapacitated, the victims were robbed, also known as jack-rolling, and thrown out into the alley. This pattern, the sweet-voiced singer who drugs and robs his audience, is the foundational behavior for his later reputation for sunny brutality. It demonstrates a profound capacity to charm and harm simultaneously, allowing him to present a warm, non-threatening persona that lowered the defenses of his victims. O'Banion cultivated a public persona that masked his extreme violence, earning him the description of a glad-hand artist in crime. His demeanor, even towards suspected rival, was characterized by warmth and excessive courtesy. One of the most revealing anecdotes about O'Banion's operational style concerned his habitual use of a particular phrase, even when discussing men he had marked for death. A reporter noted that when the air around him was red hot with the curses of his fellow gangsters against a suspected gangster, O'Banion would often exclaim, "Oh no! Swell fellow! Swell fellow!" This wasn't genuine admiration, it was a cynical code. His whim was that if a perceived colleague was booked to be killed later on that day, why talk rough about him during the afternoon of that fatal date? Such language, O'Banion believed, lacked class and unnecessarily bred suspicion. This anecdote perfectly captures his cold-blooded, calculating nature. Even his outward politeness was a strategic tool to maintain operational security and project an image of detached respectability. O'Banion was described as a chronic beamer and handshaker who loved to supplement his friendly glance and warm handshake with a pat on the back. However, observers noted a critical detail about this affable habit. He never simultaneously bestowed the handshake and the pat on the back. He preferred to keep one hand free. He could shoot well with either hand. This practical necessity stemmed from his professional requirement to always be prepared for confrontation. The police, after his death, observed that the tailors who made O'Banion's fashionable garments had a consistent problem. They had to equip those clothes with 3 capacious and readily accessible pockets to hold 3 revolvers the gangster habitually carried. This observation vividly illustrates the tension between his dapper, genial facade and the armed, vigilant killer lurking beneath. A key paradox in O'Banion's character was his adherence to a personal, if hypocritical, code of ethics. While he engaged in bootlegging, extortion, and murder, he reportedly abhorred prostitution and refused to engage in that racket. When his partner, Johnny Torrio, offered him control of a prostitution operation, O'Banion angrily refused. This selective morality, drawing a hard line at sexual vice while profiting from lethal violence, demonstrated a hypocritical rigidity that made him both unpredictable and ultimately uncompromising in later negotiations. Beneath the pleasant exterior, O'Banion was a brutal and highly effective criminal organizer. Former Chief of Police Morgan Collins once called him Chicago's arch-criminal and claimed that O'Banion had either killed or seen to the killings of 25 men. Even before the Volstead Act took effect in January 1920, O'Banion was applying his refined enforcement skills to the nascent bootlegging trade. He was already practicing hijacking liquor shipments, demonstrating his brazenness by once using a roll of coins to knock out a truck driver before stealing the vehicle and its whiskey cargo, then selling it quickly for a substantial profit. With the arrival of Prohibition, O'Banion, Weiss, Moran, and Drucci immediately leveraged their skills in violence, intimidation, and political manipulation into a lucrative full-scale bootlegging operation. This loose coalition of Irish-led gangs quickly coalesced into the powerful Northside Gang, with O'Banion as its undisputed leader. They secured control over the distribution of high-quality beer and whiskey on the North Side, including the wealthy Gold Coast district along Lake Michigan. To operate his criminal empire, O'Banion required a legitimate front. Around 1921, he acquired an interest in Schofield Flowers, a long-established Chicago flower shop located at 738 North State Street, on the northwest corner of State and Superior. The location of the shop was strategically and symbolically charged, sitting directly across the street from Holy Name Cathedral, the church where O'Banion had once sung in the choir. Schofield's Flowers served multiple critical purposes. To the public and authorities, it was a respectable business, providing the perfect cover. To the underworld, the building's second-story room served as the gang's headquarters for meetings, strategy sessions, and the collection of protection money. Furthermore, O'Banion's genuine love for flowers was visible. He was known to work behind the counter, humming and carefully arranging bouquets as an excellent arranger. The shop became the morbidly popular florist of choice for mob funerals. The placement of his headquarters directly across the street from the site of his moral upbringing, Holy Name Cathedral, highlights a critical psychological dynamic. By maintaining a physical link to his moral past, O'Banion was able to compartmentalize his life, maintaining a veneer of respectable industry and self-deception that allowed the sunny part of his persona to function despite the violence of his true profession. The Northside Gang was known for its deep loyalty, forged in the ordeal of Kilgubbin and the Circulation Wars. O'Banion surrounded himself with lifelong friends who had become his most formidable lieutenants. Earl Jaime Weiss, his closest friend and confidant. Cold and calculating, Weiss provided strategic thinking and was widely feared for his resolve and marksmanship. Weiss is also considered to have been the author of the One-Way Ride, the first victim having been Steve Wisniewski in July of 1921, who had hijacked an O'Banion beer truck. Vincent The Schemer Drucci, whose underworld debut was the robbing of coins from telephone booths, was known for carousing, harebrained schemes, and being a porn star, and a Sicilian who grew up on the North Side, disproving later myths of O'Banion's blanket ethnic hatred. George Bugs Moran, childhood friend from Kilgubbin, major bootlegger and future leader of the Northsiders. He was a killer with a rueful wit who O'Banion tended to treat as a court jester. Louis Two-Gun Altieri, real name Leland Verrain, was one of O'Banion's most loyal followers, who fancied cowboy hats and dress and was a volatile slugger and hitman. Samuel Nails Morton, one of the gang's few Jewish recruits and war hero, who became an O'Banion favorite. This intense closeness meant that the loss of a member was not merely a loss of assets, but a deep personal trauma that demanded retribution, regardless of logic. This dynamic is best exemplified by the group's reaction to the death of Samuel Morton, a decorated World War I hero and the gang's gentleman enforcer, who was killed not by a rival's bullet, but in a riding accident in Lincoln Park on May 13, 1923. Following Morton's death, caused when a stirrup strap broke and the spooked horse that he was riding kicked him in the head, the gang's leadership, including Louis Two-Gun Altieri and Jaime Weiss, exacted a bizarre form of vigilante justice. Unable to process the accidental nature of the tragedy, they kidnapped the horse, led it to the exact spot where Morton had been thrown, and executed it with 4 slugs to its head. In a final act that underscored their twisted code of honor, they reportedly called the stable owner with a chilling message. "We taught that horse of yours a lesson. If you want that saddle, go get it." This event served as a grim declaration that the Northside Gang's loyalty was absolute, holding even the natural world accountable for harming one of their own. In the early Prohibition years, the Northside Gang found itself in conflict with the powerful Southside mob led by Johnny Torrio and his lieutenant Al Capone. Recognizing that constant warfare was unprofitable, Torrio, who was an underworld visionary, sought stability and peace, brokered a pivotal truce around 1921. Under the terms of this agreement, O'Banion retained absolute control of the North Side, including the Gold Coast, and received a share of operations in Cicero, a suburb dominated by Torrio and Capone. The agreement further included joint ventures in high-revenue businesses, the Ship, a lucrative gambling casino in Cicero, and the Sieben Brewery on Chicago's North Larrabee Street, a major source of the city's beer. But through ethnic prejudices and greed, it was just a matter of time before this neat arrangement would unravel itself. The truce with the Southside outfit began to fracture under the pressure of a third major faction, the 6 Sicilian Jenner brothers, Sam, Jim, Pete, Tony, Mike, and Angelo. The Jennas, based primarily around Taylor Street in Little Italy. Their headquarters was a 3-story building at 750 West Taylor Street. The Jennas' major innovation was the industrialization of home brewing. Instead of operating a single large vulnerable distillery, they decentralized production into hundreds of private homes in Little Italy. They exploited a loophole that allowed the legal importation of industrial alcohol. They would then wash this alcohol to remove denaturing agents, or distill their own from corn sugar. The result was often low-quality rot-gut whiskey, which was sometimes toxic and even known to sometimes blind or even kill a man, but it was cheap and it was plentiful. They installed small stills in the tenement apartments of impoverished Italian immigrants. Families were paid approximately $15 a week, a significant sum at the time, to cook alcohol in their kitchens. The smell of the mash was said to be so overpowering and bad in the neighborhood that it hung over the streets like a fog. And it was an open secret that the police were paid to ignore. Before Prohibition, the Jennas had been deeply involved in Black Hand extortion. They sent letters to wealthy members of the Italian community demanding money under threat of violence. These letters were often signed with a crude drawing of a black hand, a skull, or a dagger. Anyone who refused to pay faced bombings of their businesses or homes, or direct physical assaults on themselves or their families. The trouble began when the Jenner brothers, driven by ambition, started encroaching on O'Banion's Northside territory, selling their cheap rot-gut whiskey there. O'Banion, already enraged by the infringement on his territory, launched a series of retaliatory hijackings against Jenner liquor shipments, striking directly at their profits and prestige. This direct confrontation was accompanied by fatal personal insults. O'Banion was famously uncompromising when slighted, and he voiced profound aggressive contempt for the Jennas, calling them scum and allegedly making the fatal remark in his Irish brogue, "To hell with them Sicilians." Although O'Banion had close Sicilian allies like Schemer Drucci, his aggressive contempt for the Jennas and their operation was interpreted as an ethnic challenge to the entire Chicago Italian power structure. This failure to contain his personal animosity within the bounds of rational criminal business practices elevated the dispute from a mere turf war to a crisis of honor that demanded immediate, lethal retribution from the Jenner organization and their Southside allies. The conflict with the Jennas was deeply intertwined with O'Banion's relationship with Torrio and Capone. While Torrio initially sought to restrain the Jennas to maintain the fragile peace, O'Banion's aggressive tactics and increasing arrogance made him an unmanageable partner. O'Banion escalated the instability in February 1924 by attempting to frame the Southside outfit for a murder. He lured one John Duffy, a violent Northside hanger-on who had killed his own bride, to Capone's Four Deuces Club, located at 2222 South Wabash. Duffy was taken away and killed, and his body dumped on a snowbank outside Chicago, making it appear as if the Southsiders were responsible because witness accounts to the police claimed this is where Duffy was last seen. This move, designed to inflame tensions with law enforcement and create leverage against Torrio and Capone, demonstrated O'Banion's increasing recklessness and willingness to risk massive open warfare for tactical advantage. The convergence of hostility from both the Jenna and Southside factions created an unstoppable, murderous consensus. The event that shattered the truce permanently and necessitated O'Banion's elimination occurred in the spring of 1924. O'Banion, Torrio, and Capone jointly owned interests in the lucrative Sieben Brewery on North Larrabee Street. O'Banion learned through his police and political contacts that the brewery was about to be subjected to a major police raid. O'Banion then approached Torrio and convinced him to purchase his share, portraying it as a straightforward divestment and saying that he was retiring from the rackets. Torrio paid O'Banion a massive sum, often cited around $500,000. O'Banion deliberately arranged the deal to ensure that Torrio was present when the raid occurred. The brewery was raided shortly afterward, on May 19, 1924, resulting in the arrest of Torrio and O'Banion and 29 others. The betrayal was an act of high-stakes treachery treated by O'Banion as a magnificent practical joke, a manifestation of his prankster psychopathic nature. For Torrio, however, it was a catastrophic corporate failure and a profound public humiliation. Torrio faced his second prohibition violation, ensuring a guaranteed jail sentence. He was later sentenced to 9 months in the Lake County Jail. By betraying his partner, and O'Banion refused to return the $500,000, he confirmed to the pragmatic Southside leadership that his volatile, charming unpredictability made him an existential threat that could not be managed or trusted, guaranteeing lethal retribution. The final insult, driven by O'Banion's characteristic arrogance and refusal to compromise, concerned the Ship Casino, the jointly owned gambling venture in Cicero. Angelo Jenna, one of the West Side brothers allied with Torrio, had accumulated a substantial $30,000 gambling debt. At a meeting to tally profits, Al Capone suggested forgiving Jenna's marker as a professional courtesy to ease tensions. O'Banion refused this rational suggestion. Instead, he got up, ran to a telephone, called Angelo Jenna directly, and demanded payment within a week, reportedly using abusive and contemptuous language. This act violated the fundamental unwritten rule of the underworld, elevating a recoverable financial slight into an unforgivable ethnic and personal challenge. O'Banion had left the Jenner brothers no path to restoring their prestige other than through violence. Up to this point, any plan to execute O'Banion had been vetoed by Mike Merlo, the influential head of the Unione Siciliana, a powerful Italian-American fraternal organization to which O'Banion paid and that provided O'Banion crucial political and organizational protection. This protection vanished when Merlo died of cancer on November 8, 1924. And with the political shield gone, plans for O'Banion's demise moved rapidly. A hit team was quietly assembled, combining Jenna Gang hitmen and out-of-town muscle. Brooklyn mobster Frankie Yale, who had once mentored Al Capone, and had strong ties to the outfit, traveled to Chicago, and with two Jenna gunmen, John Scalise and Albert Anselmi, Yale made several prearranged visits to Schofield's flowers under the guise of arranging floral orders for Merlot's funeral, allowing the team to study the shop's layout and O'Banion's habits. The assassination was carried out on the morning of November 10, 1924. O'Banion was at work inside Schofield's flowers, performing a task that embodied his strange duality, clipping chrysanthemums in the back area of the store. Frankie Yale, John Scalise, and Albert Anselmi entered the shop. Yale approached O'Banion, extending his hand in a gesture of friendly greeting, perfectly capitalizing on O'Banion's own signature disarming charm. O'Banion was, as stated earlier, a chronic beamer and handshaker who used courtesy as a tactical shield, but always kept one hand free to access the 3 revolvers he habitually carried in the pistol pockets of his fashionable garments. Yale, however, held O'Banion's hand in a powerful death grip and would not let go, neutralizing O'Banion's vigilance and his primary defensive posture. Trapped in the handshake, O'Banion was helpless as Scalise and Anselmi stepped forward and opened fire at nearly point-blank range. Dean was struck repeatedly. Shots to the chest and to the throat knocked him down, and one killer reportedly delivered the coup de grace, a final shot to the back of his head as he lay face down on the floor. The killing took only seconds and occurred in the very place where he had tried to blend legitimate business with criminal power, directly across the street from his childhood church, Holy Name Cathedral. O'Banion's funeral was one of the most elaborate gangland ceremonies Chicago had yet seen, and Chicago would see many more. Despite opposition from church authorities, he received an ornate service. Ironically, the massive floral display was largely arranged through his own shop. The procession to Mount Carmel Cemetery in suburban Hillside, Illinois, drew crowds and featured extravagant floral tributes. Al Capone and other Southside figures attended or sent displays maintaining the complex, ritualistic facade of respect that governed the underworld. In organizational terms, O'Banion's death did not restore peace. It intensified the conflict dramatically. Jaime Weiss succeeded him as leader of the Northside Gang and immediately moved to retaliate. In January 1925, Weiss, Moran, and Drucci launched near-successful assassination attempts on both Al Capone and Johnny Torrio. On January 12th, Al Capone's car came under drive-by attack at 55th and State Streets as he entered a restaurant. He was not hit, but a bodyguard was shot in the knee. This attempt led Capone to order his famous armored Cadillac. On January 25th, Johnny Torrio was caught outside his residence at 7011 South Clyde. Torrio was returning from a shopping spree with his wife when he was approached by Jaime Weiss and Bugs Moran and shot several times. He survived, but was badly shaken. He subsequently chose to cede control of the outfit to Al Capone and leave Chicago. And in a span of months in 1925, the Northsiders decimated the house of Jenna. On May 26, 1925, Northside gunmen Moran, Weiss, and Drucci chased the youngest of the Jennas, Angelo Jenna, down in a high-speed car battle. He crashed his car into a lamppost at Hudson and Ogden Avenues. Already wounded and trapped, he was shotgunned to death. His funeral was massive, featuring a $3,000 bronze casket and $75,000 in flowers, illustrating his power. On June 13, 1925, Mike Jenna, known as Mike the Devil, along with Scalise and Anselmi, engaged in a shootout with police on 59th and Western Avenue. Mike was wounded in the leg, severing an artery and cornered in a basement. And while being loaded into an ambulance, he famously kicked one of the attendants in the face, snarling, "Take that, you bastard," before dying of blood loss. On July 8, 1925, Tony Jenna was lured to a meeting at Grand Avenue and Curtis Street by a supposed friend. As they shook hands, gunmen stepped out and killed him, a mirror of the O'Banion hit. He died later at the hospital after revealing the betrayal to his brother Sam. The remaining Jenner brothers, Sam, Jim, and Pete, their power broken, fled Chicago or went into hiding, effectively ending the Jenner reign. Their territory and rackets were absorbed by the Chicago outfit under Al Capone. The terrible Jennas are remembered as the style of violent, clannish Sicilian gang that could not adapt to the corporate style of the Capone era. O'Banion's impulsivity and brazen betrayal thus inadvertently created the power vacuum that Capone eagerly filled. The removal of Torrio elevated Capone to the undisputed boss of the South Side, ensuring that O'Banion's assassination marked the true opening salvo of the prolonged 5-year Chicago gang war between the North Side Gang and the Chicago outfit. The Northsiders, led successively by Weiss, who was killed in 1926, Drucci, killed by police in 1927, and finally Moran, were never able to recover, leading ultimately to the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929. The ultimate historical significance of Charles Dion O'Banion lies in his unique paradoxical personality and his inability to conform to rational criminal business practices. His mixture of personal honor, refusing prostitution, genuine sentiment, the flower shop, and reckless arrogance, the Sieben betrayal, and the Jenna insults made him too volatile to coexist with the calculated pragmatism of Torrio and Capone. His death, executed using his own signature Glanhad move, was not just a hit, it was a strategic personal execution that destroyed the man using his own facade. Charles Dion O'Banion was 32 years old when he was murdered. So goes the story of Dion O'Banion. Charles Dion O'Banion stands at a historical crossroads. He was a product of the Rush-Irish enclave of Kilgubbin and the violent Chicago newspaper circulation wars. His capacity for violence was inseparable from a deeply sentimental nature, evidenced by his attachment to his mother's memory and his genuine passion for flowers. This synthesis of extremes, the sunny brutality, defined his short, explosive reign. The true legacy of the florist gangster is not his life, but his death. The murder of Dion O'Banion on November 10, 1924, shattered the fragile peace of the underworld. It forced the retirement of Johnny Torrio and ushered in the undisputed rule of Al Capone, initiating the bloody, prolonged conflict that would define Chicago for the rest of the decade and cement its legend as the capital of American gang warfare. O'Banion was, in essence, the emotional, impulsive catalyst required to transform organized crime from a set of territorial rackets into a ruthless, centralized corporate institution. And in the comments below, let me know your thoughts on the Crazy Irishman. I'm James Jenkins. If you've enjoyed this episode of Chicago's most famous florist, you know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, share, and be on the lookout for another episode of James on the Mob. And remember, life is so short, so don't whack it off. See yous.